now, and we're recording. People are still coming in. So Devora, you'll see me, my eyes wander every so often while I see the people in the waiting room, and I keep on letting them in. So welcome, Devora. Say hello.
Hello,
Yes,
everyone.
you're live. That's wonderful. Thank you very much for joining us today on this very special session of Thursday Lunch Club. It's special because we have some people coming in from country Victoria at the moment, which, Devora, is where you're from. Where were you born?
In Shepparton.
You were actually born in Shepparton?
I was born in Shepparton in a private hospital called Ambermere, which doesn't exist now. I think there's a motel there.
Right. And not the name Zmood, though?
No, I was Alperstein.
Alperstein.
You went from A to Z.
I went from A to Z, yes.
That's a good point. Thank you very much. And Ron is your backup person at the moment, I notice. I can hear him in the background. Thank you, Ron. Tell us, Devora, a bit about your family back in Shepparton.
Okay, well, my mother was originally, of course, from Melbourne. She's actually third generation born Australian. And she went to visit a girlfriend, I think it was Zora Gore in Shepparton. They had an orchard, and she ended up meeting my father, who had arrived in Australia, I think in 1928? 27? And he somehow, my understanding is he ended up on the Faglan orchards, working there until I guess he met my mum, and they finally bought a property.
And Devora, can you recognise this photo?
It's not there yet.
Sorry, you can't see that?
No, it's still whirring around.
Oh, I see.
It's the screen sharing hasn't opened up yet.
And is that working at the moment?
Oh, yes, that's an awful one of it, actually. I can show you a better one.
And Devora, what is that?
That's the remnants of the synagogue.
Right. I actually found on the National Archives some photos from Shepparton.
Yes.
Do you recognise anyone there?
Well, they're the Faglan, Rosenbaum, I think Barimsky. I've got a list somewhere of who they are.
Right.
One of the original 8 families.
Yeah, we've got that photo.
We've got that. Go and see if you can find who the names were. Yes, they Shepparton, of course, was set up as a Jewish agricultural settlement, and the history of that, actually, Ronnie, if anyone's interested, is completely written. Can you see that, or no? I have to share screen. It's written up in the Australian Jewish Historical Society journal, 2004.
Yes.
Part 3. Yeah, that's completely. Okay. This one.
Yes.
It's written up the story by David Faglan about the whole history of that Jewish agricultural settlement, who the original orchardists were. Some of them obviously were the Chabad families, and sent originally by the original Chabad rabbi from Russia, but some of them were also people who'd come from Palestine and who actually had some farming expertise. So the Hayat families were
right.
Those families. So yes, but of course when I was growing up, by the time I was old enough to probably remember things, most of the Faglan families and those families had moved to Melbourne. So there was basically, when I was growing up, there were the probably non-religious families still there. And most of them lived in Orvar, which is where the Jewish agricultural settlement started. But some of us lived on the other side, which was over in the, northeast side. And so very spread around. There were just a few of us, like the Pratt family, the Trebek's family, the Bloomers family, ourselves. There were only 2 of us we were in Lemnos, which was an old First World War soldier resettlement area, and that's my father bought the orchard off one of those families. And so there were only 2 Jewish families at the little Lemnos State School I went to. That was the Bloomers family and ourselves. And then the Pratt and Trebacks and Rubenstein, Liebler families were in what's called Grahamvale, but the rest, the bulk of the Shepparton Jewish community was in the Orvale area. And yes, so I didn't have a lot of Jewish friends my own age when I was growing up, whereas on the other side, they, you know, had their very close links to, you know, to their fellow Jewish families.
Right. So you said you came from Melbourne, or Mum came from Melbourne.
Mum came from Melbourne.
The Lubavitch families came from Russia. You mentioned Liebler, you mentioned Pratt, you mentioned a few other. Where were they from?
Oh, well, I know the Pratt family were from Poland.
Right.
And then there was, some of the families that stayed when I was growing up were actually Dunera boys, like Mr. Adler. He was a Dunera boy. I think Mr. Gruenberg might have been. Look, it's, you know, I really don't remember a lot about who was who. I mean, I remember Elf Schmidt, the late Elf Schmidt. He would have been a Dunera boy. What happened was the Orthodox Dunera boys were somehow released to the Faglin family, and they lived in what we call the hostel, or the Hada Ohel. On the grounds of the Shule, there was this hall, and they lived there and worked for the Faglin, on the Faglin orchards.
Now, Devora, you've sort of explained that there would seem to be 2 groups. You were in Lemnos with only a couple of families, Jewish families.
Yes.
And then a bit more west was the larger
Was
group.
southeast, I think, southeast of Shepparton. Yeah.
Right.
Orvale southeast, I think, of Shepparton.
So did you experience anti-Semitism at school?
No. On the whole, no. And the reason I'd say is because a lot of my neighbours were Muslim. I was in an area where, in fact, by the time I left home, they were all Muslim. There were a lot of Albanian and Macedonian families who also were there in the 50s. And so when they had, and in years ago, of course, they had religious instruction. They were very, you know, strict about that. And we would go out, Muslims and the 2 Jewish families would go out to the shelter shed while they had their RI lesson. Yes, so no, I didn't. I mean, I probably had one child, and there was an Italian background actually, who made a comment. So I'm afraid I just informed her that Jesus was a Jew, and after that she was so horrified she never said a thing again. And so apart from that little episode, I actually know. It was a very immigrant little state school. As I said, Italian, were they Greek? I think mostly Italian, Macedonian, Albanian, and then old Australian, well, you know, families.
And thinking about Lemnos and, in fact, all little small groups, how many Jews are we talking about in Shepparton in your day?
Oh, look, there were probably somewhere between, say, 60 families at the peak, maybe a few more, remembering that during the war, some families actually were sent, and I hope they don't mind me saying so, like the Steinbergs, they were sent to Shepparton during the actual war years. So there were more families during the war years actually living in Shepparton who were sent away from the city because of the fear of it being attacked. But, and a lot of families like Ron's relatives, the Dapscheks, they bought an orchard, but then they didn't stay that long and sold. And there were a few business people in Melbourne who actually bought properties, but they didn't stay, they didn't live there. Right. So if you look, I actually have an old like council map, and it names, and you can see where all the Jewish names are from those many years ago. And there were a lot, but they didn't stay. So when I grew up, the families that were there stayed until, having mostly girls. They all drifted, of course, back to Melbourne for the girls to either go to tertiary education or to get jobs. And there were very few boys.
So,
So in the end, bit by bit, by the late 60s, I guess, or early, that was it. And the Shule, of course, probably ceased to exist after the early 60s because they couldn't get a minion. And in that book that David Feiglin wrote, it lists all the people who, the rabbis that served the Shule until in the end, my father ran all the services. He had been brought up in a little town which is really Bilo, Russia, and in yeshivot. Very resentful my father was of not being able to get a secular education. And when he was 20, I guess, they called him up to the Polish army. So he high-daddled out of there, got out of there, going across on a raft on the frozen river and got into Germany. So he was very educated in Jewish education, and so he led the services. In fact,
I'll come back to the services in a moment. So you've told us a bit about the number of families. You think about 60 families. Was Dad himself an orchardist, by the way?
Sorry,
was Dad an orchardist?
Yes, he was an orchardist. And
so were all 60 families associated with an orchard, or do they have other professions?
The majority were, except a few had shops. A few were shopkeepers. So there were people had frock shops. The Adlers had a frock shop. The Rosenbergs had sold, and I've forgotten his wife, had a frock shop. The Blooms had a fruit shop. The Gores had the pharmacy. There were a few in the city. There were also some other people who had businesses there that didn't identify as Jews, but I knew full well they were.
Hang on, so wait. On Yom Kippur, did you see them?
We saw everybody that identified as a Jew on Yom Kippur from Rosh Hashanah, or if somebody had all the Yom Tovim, they would come to Shul in later years, and if someone had to say Kaddish, even though people weren't religious, they would come. Everybody basically was one big family, honestly. They were very supportive of each other, and if they needed to run a Shul service, they would come.
Okay, let's talk about
and
Jewish.
Also the Hakshara sometimes, again, that was in Tulamba, but in later years, if they needed to say Kaddish, 8 of them had arrived, they would also come to Shul. I mean, my father would sometimes come home with 10 extra for lunch.
Hang on, where are they from? Where are these 10 extras from?
The Haksharan, the Hebrew training farm.
So hang on, could you tell us a bit more about that?
Okay,
what were they doing there?
They were learning how to live on the land before they went on Aliyah to Israel. The Hakshara was in Tulamba, and I think it was sold in 1960.
How many were at Hakshara?
I don't know. It's probably 20, 30 kids. I actually don't know. If anyone is online there who knows, but my father used to go across. We used to quite often visit, and they had poultry, they had orchard. I think they had dairy. I can't remember. Oh my goodness.
Well, hang on. No, we won't do that yet. I might have a photo from Hakshara. We'll skip a bit. Was that Hakshara?
No, that is the Habonim group.
That's the Habonim group.
Yes.
So this is a Habonim group in Shepparton area.
Yes, and that girl is from the Hakshara. That girl there.
We can't see where you're pointing.
Okay, it's the one with the tie. The tie sort of.
This one here.
Yes.
Yes, right.
She was our madrich, and she was, I think it was Sylvia, but she came across from the Hakshara. And so it was all girls, of course.
Yes.
And this is in our little hall, and some of the people in the front there on the left are Hakshara people. They're not community people, they're Hakshara people.
So Hakshara was a separate group from the rest of the community.
Yes.
And they all made Aliyah in the end. Is that what happened?
Pretty much. Some of them a few of them came back in the end, but yep, they all went to Israel, to some of the kibbutzim, like kibbutz Yisrael, and I've forgotten where else they went, but yeah.
So it was quite a Zionist community in Shepparton?
Very, very Zionist, very. Their entire social activities when they got together, even if they, one of the photographs you just threw up was the JNF. They were very involved.
Let's see if we can bring that up again. I think, and it's not this one, but we're going to go back for a moment. This one, for example.
That one is Nathan Balla and Rothfield, forgotten her first name. Yeah, that would have been a JNF visit. And although we were a little tiny community, we supported the JNF Queen competitions, and several of the girls, including myself, I'm actually still reigning because I was the last Queen candidate.
Could that be you?
Oh, yes, that's me. I was a Queen candidate for JNF. And although we didn't raise huge amounts compared with the Melbourne community,
yes,
it was a way for people to get together and have functions. And even if they just met socially sometimes and played cards, the money went into a little dish for a JNF. Very, very Zionistic.
Right.
So we often had visitors, even the chief rabbi, what was his name? Rabinowitz?
Jacobowitz?
Yeah, Jacobowitz maybe it was. He visited once to Little Shepparton. So we were on the map.
Okay. Now, focusing a little bit more on the Jewish community, Jewish education.
Okay. We had a Sunday school. On Sunday mornings, we would go to the hall, and the rabbis, I don't know, the last one was Reverend Shidler. I think we used to learn to read Hebrew. I really don't remember what else we did. It's so long ago, but we did go. And then my father ran it for a while after that. I really can't remember when it stopped, but my father did teach several of the boys their bar mitzvah. In fact, he even had one boy come from Leeton. I don't know why he came from Leeton to be trained for his bar mitzvah, but he did. And Pesach, sometimes we would have people even from, I don't know why they came to Shepparton, from Puckapunyal.
Army training camp.
Yeah. So it was a very, as I say, close-knit community, but my father actually was an informal, if you like, community leader. And one of my memories of our life was, I guess on a Sunday, we'd troop off and go visit someone. We were always visiting the different families, whether it was to Chura, there was a Gore family in Kyabram, had a pharmacy. There were the Rosenbaums in Tachura. Otherwise, if you went across to Orvale and Prentice Road, there was the two Hayat families, the Silverstein family, which was a sister, and the Cronenbergs, the Grimblatts. They were just one whole row. That particular road was just a little oasis of Judaism. So, of course, they spent, I'm sure, a lot of time together, the kids, whereas I pretty much had to occupy myself. My sister, being a bookworm, she wasn't too much company.
Fair enough. Now, I'm a Melbourne boy, and my holidays have been up to Shepparton, Maroop.
Right, in Maroopna also, you're frozen, Ronnie. Ronnie has frozen. Ronnie's frozen, Ron.
What?
Can't do anything, can I?
What's happened?
He's frozen.
Don't know.
You want to tell him?
Did the internet gone down? I'll call him and see what's going on. Got his phone number?
Yeah. Oh. Hi, Alan. Looks like we're frozen.
Hello. Sorry, can you see me now?
Yes, I can. You went into a frozen state.
Correct. My computer, I've noticed, is just frozen, which is very inconvenient. Couldn't have happened at the worst possible time, but we're going to continue because we're going to continue on my phone. That's my backup plan. So I was just saying I'm a Melbourne. So I apologise to everyone for that. Unexpected, but anyway, I was saying I'm a Melbourne boy. I have holidays in Shepparton, Mooroopna, Kyabram, Mildura. Where were holidays for you?
Now, good question. If you realise we grew up on an orchard, so the summer was picking season. So mostly we spent time working, grading fruit and helping. We did have a break. My parents did organise that my sister and brother and I always tried to send us to Hubbanim camps, summer and winter camps. So we did come down to Melbourne and go off to, where is it, Yarra Glen and Ocean Grove, wherever they had Hubbo camps. Intense in those days, I might tell you, not like the spoiled kids of today. We were intense.
I know.
So holidays actually were a busy time for the family, and certainly the parents didn't get away because it was the fruit picking season. So that's summertime for us, was working on the orchard. And I expect it would have been the same for most of the other families.
Right. Now, you also spoke quite a bit about Shule already. The hall was associated with the Shule, correct?
Yeah, I've got a photograph of the hall, if you want me to show it to you.
Yeah, you can certainly hold it up to your camera if you like.
I'll have to go get it to my desk. All right, I'll
no,
just get it. All right, leave it. Anyway, yes, well, as I said, people went, in the beginning, we probably had Shule every week, but when I was very young, but after that, and I obviously still remember when the Faglins would have, and the family still would have been there, because this, what we called a Shule, was a little house and it had a side section to it. And I can remember these guys in black in my memory must have been learning on that side room. But as I said, very probably late 40s, they would have moved, early 50s, they would have all moved to Melbourne. So the Shule was where we went for Yontif, and those Shabbat we could. And obviously, Ronnie, because some of us lived probably 8 miles away, everybody drove. It just, except for the families who lived across the road from the synagogue and the Faglins who were down the road, people want to go to synagogue, they had to drive.
Fair enough.
And my father was.
And actually,
My father was.
I was going to ask.
Did the services, but he was helped by Mr. Jack Rosenbaum and Mr. Adler. So,
Right. And the capacity of the Shule, are we talking 20 people, 30 people? How many people fit in the Shule?
oh, probably 20, 30 men, yeah. I think so. I've got. I think there's an ex-Sheppartonian on here. If she is, I wish she'd put her thing up. She can tell me if I'm wrong.
Well,
Barbara,
she
are
can
you
type in
there?
the chat and I can invite her.
Is Barbara Eras there?
Barbara, I'm just telling. Yes, Barbara is, and I can ask her. I've asked to unmute her, and let's see if we can see Barbara. Give me one minute. It's a little more challenging on. Yes, she is, and we're going to see if we can spotlight her as well. It's a little more challenging on the phone. There's Barbara. Hello, Barbara.
I can't. I don't know how to put it up my photo up. Can you hear me?
Yes. It wasn't clear, but yes, we can hear you now.
Mrs. Cronenberg used to walk to Shule too.
Oh, did she? She walked all the way.
She always fainted when she got there because on fasting day she was fasting as well. So she walked a long way.
And Barbara and Devora, could tell me about Kiddushim. That's the main reason why people go to Shul. Tell us about Kiddush.
We didn't have Kiddush, did we? We didn't ever have a Kiddush. No, I don't think so. I don't remember a Kiddush.
One of my brothers bar mitzvahed in Shepparton. Your father, Mr. Alperstein, taught him for his bar mitzvah.
Right.
My brother Isaac.
Oh, I get that. Yeah, it would have been Isaac.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the circumcisions for the boys also was in Shepparton, so I'm not sure which rabbi did that.
Yes.
Do you remember, Devora, who the rabbi was that did the circumcisions for the boys?
Oh, no, I don't. I suspect it was someone who came from Melbourne. I don't think we had anyone there who could do circumcisions.
We did have a rabbi there for a while. He was the shochet. He was everything in Shepparton. He did everything.
Well, Barbara and Devora, I actually want to, that's the photo of the hall.
Okay, that's the synagogue. That's the synagogue in the shadow, and that's the hall over there.
Right. Okay, got it.
And this is by courtesy of Sylvia Blair.
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah,
Devora, back
the Blair family and the Carp family.
That's right. The Carp family had a shop in town, and the Blair family had an orchard.
Yes.
Right. And I wanted to ask, Devora, if I can return to you, I want to ask you, Devora, about kosher food. Barbara's just mentioned a shochet. Was there kosher food?
Okay, the shochet did the chickens, but the meat, red meat, if you wanted red meat, you had to get it to come down on the train from Melbourne.
So you had to book it in Melbourne, and then they'd send it up to you.
Yeah.
And in the summer it was hot, and I don't think
it'd go off.
The meat would go off.
That's right.
Not a very good investment, I wouldn't have thought.
No.
Now, Devora, the demise of the community. You said boys moved, or families moved to Melbourne. When did that happen?
Mostly, I'd say by the end of, late 50s, early 60s. I think pretty much everybody gone. Maybe Barbara, your family was a bit later.
Yes, my parents never moved to Melbourne. They hated the city.
The children. What year did you go, Barbara? To
about 1960, I think.
Yes, I did too. And by then there was pretty much just a few boys left. My brother and your two brothers and the boys Silverstein. And Ronnie, actually, there's only one from that Jewish community, one Jewish orchardist left, and that's Morris Silverstein.
Oh, so there's still there to this day.
Yes, Morris is still there on that same orchard that his father had started. So that's Barbara's cousin.
Now, having a community of one shul was a bit of an anathema to those living here in Melbourne today. If you had a broigus, or as the South Africans call a faribble, in that shul, where did you go?
It didn't happen.
Ah, very good.
At least not that I was aware of as a child. Didn't happen. People, as I said, it was a whole mix of people. Most, except maybe Mrs. Cronenberg, were not religious. And they came together for the sake of everybody. Everybody sort of did it to support each other. And they were very cooperative. When they needed a minion, they'd come.
What do you most miss about Shepparton life, Jewish life in Shepparton?
Well, I guess because there, as we got older, there really wasn't a Jewish life, apart from meeting for our little Habanim group. During the week and on weekends, generally we didn't mix. I didn't go across to Orvale, so we pretty much lived an independent, quiet life on our side of town. And my social activities was going along with my parents, visiting all the different families, because I can tell you we would visit just about every family that lived in Shepparton. And there was another family I didn't mention, the Weiss family. They left much earlier on, in the early 50s, I think they came to live in Melbourne. But my father just would visit all these families. It was just the social life that I had. And otherwise, I was pretty much at home and occupied myself. Quite often, I would just walk. I would walk to all my neighbours, and it could be miles, to my Australian neighbours. I must tell you, where I lived in Lemnos was an old, as I said, an old First World War soldier settlement area. And at the back of my property, I'd walk to the back fence just for a walk, was Colonel E.P.H. Hill, who was from the First World War, who knew Simpson and his donkey. And that always used to, you know, sort of grab me, and I'd think, oh, we really, because in our little readers at school, we'd learn about Simpson and his donkey, and he was the guy at my back fence who knew him. But the other thing I have to say is, I don't know about Barbara, but where I lived, our property was 2 orchards past the last electricity pole. So until I was 12, we did not have electricity. I grew up until then with the pressure pumps and the pressure lamps that you'd pump up. I think it was metho they put in to light the wicks. A combustion stove that had a pipe going through it to heat up the hot water, and solid irons, of just solid iron, that'd sit on the back of the stove to heat up so you could iron some clothes. And also we didn't have a refrigerator, obviously, until we had electricity. So twice a week, the iceman would come with a big rectangular block of ice to put in the ice chest. So life was a bit different then. I still remember the draft horses until we finally got a tractor. And I guess we must have had a truck, because I don't remember ever going in a horse and cart. But anyway, it was, it was different times in those years.
I assume you didn't order anything online in those days.
No. Okay. But my parents did drive to Melbourne, my mother being from Melbourne and being 3rd generation born Australian. She had a lot of family. So we did come down, I guess, for bar mitzvahs, weddings. I don't think we ever came down for Yontif, but we did come to Melbourne. And of course, in early years, we only had a truck, so we'd be sitting on the back, no cover. And it was then, and you don't have the beautiful highway we have now, was probably a 3.5 hour trip. Now you can do it in 2 hours.
Devora, thank you very, very much. We've pretty much done our time again. I apologise that my computer froze and we've moved to my phone. I hope it's worked reasonably well from there on.
Yeah.
But thank you very, very much, Devora, for sharing a different world. It's a different world.
It was a
probably to
different.
many of our listeners
Yes,
today.
it was a different world. It was probably a lot easier on the other side because they had electricity earlier than we did.
Yes, I'm sure. Some important announcements. So thank you very much, Devora. Some important announcements.
My pleasure.
Firstly, as of next week, we will have a new Zoom ID number.
Oh.
If you are receiving our Shule newsletters, then you'll see the new Zoom ID. But you can certainly contact me if you're not getting the newsletter. Please type in your email address now into the chat, and I'm happy to make sure you get our newsletter from now on. I note, by the way, that Gwen Absitz had asked you, Devora, a bit about Wheatso. There was a Wheatso, I believe.
And no, we did the JNF Queen competition.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
Oh.
So as of next week, a new Zoom ID. By the way, next week we Sorry, Dora.
Yeah. Go on. No.
Yeah.
Go on.
As of next week, we also interview Beverly Honig, who's a multi-award-winning business person on the topic of breaking through the glass ceiling. And the following week, we're going to interview someone who's going to tell us a bit about de-radicalization of Islamists. Fascinating topic. Stay with us. You'll enjoy it. Make sure you put your email address in. If you're not getting the newsletter, we'll make sure that you get the newsletter so you know the coming topics. Next Shabbat, by the way, is the Shabbos Project internationally. St Kilda Shule will be doing a communal Havdalah live from the Shule and from Sydney. We're teaming up with Maroubra Synagogue in Sydney and with Elwood Shule here in Melbourne. So we'll be live from St Kilda Shule and then crossing over live to Sydney. So a lot of stuff happening. We've also got, by the way, Adam Schwab, who is the founder and CEO of Luxury Escapes. He'll be doing a live broadcast being interviewed by Brett Kay in a month's time. Also, Bet Halochem DVO will be doing something with us in a month's time. So make sure you get the newsletter. I appreciate you once again joining us all today. Thank you very much, Devora, for sharing with us. And it's been fascinating as usual. And stay tuned for more. All the best. May all your news be good news. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.